Do you know what's nonsense? That boxing is broken. No, it's not. In the last 18 months, we've had some phenomenal fights. So we're in a great period.
I think they can drive a coach and horses through the existence of the WBCs, the WBAs and the IBFs and make it a one game in town inside 2 years if they want to.
Build it from the ground up doesn't take 2 years. It takes a lot longer than that. The UFC model that Dana White took over at that time, it was already broken. It was a smaller model and he built it to what it was.
To Dana was an...
Despite you being a Joshua Lickspittle, do you think Anthony Joshua is credible now as a challenger for a world title again?
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Why?
Why not? It was in his system at the time when he got the ban. It still has not been clear to anybody that it wasn't in his system, but he's been cleared to box. That's what we got to remember.
He's been cleared to box.
That's all it is.
If you think this is so offensive,
why are you fighting me?
Why are you fighting me then?
Yeah.
The reason why you're fighting me is because you need some money, Chris. I felt sorry for Junior because he is a 34-year-old man at the time. He wants his own thing. His father is always going to be the centre of attention.
Yeah.
I think he's right to make his own decision.
We need Senior there. We need him there, and we need him, to complete the story, the legacy, the years, and everything else. But most importantly, for me, we need him there because it's his son in a massive fight.
Could you imagine if I put you in a headlock, what you would have done?
What would you have? Good step there to get there in the first place. Welcome to episode 112 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. Today we're joined by the inimitable Adam Smith. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Boys, all well? Everything
Very
good?
well, thank you.
All good.
Good. Let's kick off the show talking about the heavyweight division and the current conundrum facing Alexander Usyk. Are you across that subject, Spence?
Yeah, I am across it. I think that Alexander Usyk is looking for another dance partner, who I believe is going to be Daniel Dubois. I think that fight happens next, and with the WBO recently stating that, they want him to step up and fight somebody else, I believe that he will vacate that WBO title because they wanted him to fight Joseph Parker. I believe that title, he will fight Dubois. The WBO, then Parker will be elevated from interim into world champion. Anthony Joshua boxes Joseph Parker for the WBO title, and the winner then boxes again for the undisputed. That's the route I see.
You've got it all worked out, haven't you?
I have.
Alexander Usyk wants 2 more fights in his career, and I believe the last one he wants, if possible, to fight in the Ukraine. So if that is feasible within the next year or two, but I think Daniel Dubois is the fight that makes sense for Usyk. Obviously, the rematch commercially it does. That does obviously fall on Joseph Parker's sort of sorry shoulders almost. Like, we love Joseph Parker. He's done everything right. Fantastic form under Andy Lee. Beats Piccoli at short notice. And he deserves the opportunity. However, I agree with Spencer. I think he might end up fighting AJ. I did a sort of round robin with fans in Liverpool on Saturday night, and most people felt that Parker deserved the opportunity.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, where do you think? I mean, ultimately, the argument raged that he can't be rewarded by the dropping out through Daniel Dubois through no fault of his own because he wasn't well, by getting a fight against Piccoli and then sort of being shuffled back into a pack. And then, of course, the more nuanced argument gets put forward, which is, well, it was a voluntary defence, and them's the rub. I mean, where are you on the idea that Usyk should be fighting Parker in this instance rather than Dubois? Because we've seen Undisputed, and we're not going to see Undisputed again. Do you think Parker should be getting... Put aside his roadmap, which may or may not happen. The next tangible opportunity is for someone to fight Usyk for a belt. Do you not think it should be Parker?
In boxing terms, yes.
Yeah.
Joe Parker deserves the opportunity to become that two-time champion, WBO way back, and now he's reinvigorated his career, and it's fantastic to see. However, the Dubois rematch makes more commercial sense because of what happened last time, because of the, in quotes, low blow, and also because Daniel's on phenomenal form. He pulled out through illness in Riyadh, obviously at those 2 days' notice, and now they reset, and I believe that they'll make the Usyk-Dubois fight. I think that...
So do I.
Yeah, it does make more sense for the casual fans. Yep. I think it sells out here.
So in your theory, the belts get broken up because the WBA have called them mandatory.
WBO,
right?
yeah.
WBO,
yeah.
sorry, yeah. And are you suggesting, in your theory, that it becomes a vacant belt that ultimately Joseph Parker assumes because he's the interim champion?
No,
or he has to fight for it?
WBO interim champion means if that title becomes vacant,
does he assume it instantaneously?
He gets, he
doesn't have to fight for it.
So he's now WBO champion.
So he then suffers from the Daniel Dubois curse,
yes,
which is actually fighting Hrgović was actually really a world title
But he
fight
didn't get the belt.
He didn't get the belt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, so he doesn't win the belt, Joseph.
So
Parker.
no, he gets
He
elevated.
gets awarded, so he
yeah,
becomes that two-time heavyweight champion.
That's the idea of the interims. That's how it works. That if this situation happens, he gets elevated straight to WBO champion.
But it is odd because you really want Joe Parker to fight for that world title, but he's going to grant it, and I guess he'll defend against AJ.
I mean,
then AJ could become a three-time heavyweight champion.
I mean, this interim nonsense is just a load of old nonsense, really, isn't it? I mean, I always find myself struggling with the idea that people get introduced into a ring as a world champion with interim in front of it.
Well, Spencer and I have gone for intercontinentals, interim, continentals, all sorts of different belts. I think the only reason that they have them, well, for the governing bodies, obviously, and for fighters, is just to get a rung on the ladder. Really, we want a world championship or we don't.
Absolutely.
Listen, we look at Catterall, who's a WBC interim champion.
Super fighter.
And people talk about the form that he's on. Where does he fit into this? You know, because he's now that guy that was like Martin Piccoli, where he's now the who needs him, who wants him club, unless I've got to fight him because of the run that he's on. And, you know, this guy's not even being talked about. You're going like talking about Joseph Parker and saying, listen, he deserves his opportunity. What about Catterall?
Catterall's turning everyone over.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal form. Undefeated and winning and looking good doing it.
Well, look, I mean, we'll talk more about the fighters in a different part of the show. But let's talk about the governing bodies and look at some of the rankings that we've got in terms of the credibility. The argument is being put forward, and it's a self-serving argument from Dana White and Turki Alalshikh about the fact it's broken. And to some extent, maybe they've got some point because they've come along and fixed it and elevated it to the position of what it could be, rather than what the promoters previously have presided over and the governing bodies have presided over previously, which is not making fights, constant difficulties between promoters being able to put people in a ring, and broadcasters at odds with one another about who's going to show the fight. So there is an element of what they're saying has resonance. But when you look at the rankings, and I see people like, with due respect, Lawrence Okoli, who I like very much as a person, but find it difficult to take anything serious, that you've won a Bridgerweight title. And of course, you won the cruiserweight title, I understand that, but you lost it. And you have one fight, one round in the heavyweights, and you're number one in one of the marquee belts. And with due respect to Derek, who I like a lot as well, and we know that we all like, is number 3 in the WBO. Doesn't this fuel the argument that's being put forward by Turki and Dana White that boxing is broken, or does it not?
No, I think that, look, there's heavyweight rankings there, and if you look through those rankings, most of the fighters are sort of in those top 10, the same sort of names and whatever. And I think that, you know, it's just the way that it runs and the way that it is. And Lawrence Okoli...
Sorry, I got it wrong. Derek's number 2 in the IBF,
yes,
not number 3 in the WBO.
Yeah. And you know, he's earned his right to be there, I suppose. You're looking at the names that are there, and you're going like, if you look at the top names, and you've got like obviously Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury, you don't know what he's doing. You've got Anthony Joshua, Martin Piccoli, you know, Justice Heaney, and all those. You look at all those, and they're all in that top 10 there or thereabouts.
But it's not.
Lawrence Okoli's been elevated.
Spence. You look at the WBA.
Simon,
do you know
Fabio's
what's
number 1.
Hang on a minute. Do you know what's nonsense? That boxing is broken. No, it's not, right?
I
His
totally
Excellency in the last year and a half has turned the boxing landscape around. We're getting the best fighting the best, the great cards, OK? What's happened here? Dana White now wants to become involved. This is fantastic for our sport, that more investment comes in, more changes are going to be made. Terrific. It's always been a little bit of the Wild West, the governing bodies, because we love the unpredictability of it all.
But everyone, forever and a day, was constantly talking about the fights that never happened. So if there's an element of Turki Alalshikh has fixed that problem, by the definition of fix, doesn't it mean it was broken? And if he decides to depart, and ultimately this new engine room of the Ring magazine being the wrapper, and decides that Saudi money isn't for the longer term, won't it go back to what it was before, which was the vision of these fights never really manifesting themselves? Undisputed's coming around once every quarter of a century. The best fighters not getting into fights in their pomp, because it'll go back to what was the broadcasters being at odds with one another because one promoter's indexed to another promoter. Won't it go back to what it was before?
Spencer and I have lived through decades of this sort of stuff. When we didn't get Lewis Bowe, we didn't get Hatton and Witter, we didn't get Froch and Calzaghe, we got Mayweather and Pacquiao way too late, we got Brook and Khan way too late. Now, in the last 18 months, we've had some phenomenal fights. So we're in a great period.
But that's the part of the business that has been fixed and was broken. But when you're talking about
the only part.
No, it's not. No, we're talking about the 4 governing bodies, which Turkey is still keeping with this new system they're coming in with. It's not like they're going to go, right, we're going to have this league and there's going to be no governing bodies.
But
there.
it seemed at first.
He's already, that's what he was trying to do. No, that's what he was trying to do. But the governing bodies are still involved in this.
Well, no, what he's doing.
He's keeping the governing bodies involved.
What he's suggested that he's not in. Turkey will say one thing to garner attention and another in a different conversation. In one conversation, he'll turn around and say that he's going to destroy certain aspects of the boxing fraternity, whether it's the broadcasting relationships, because they're dead now and he's going to own all the broadcasting rights and everyone's going to fight for him. In another breath, he'll turn around and say that ultimately you can't have the Canelo with his WBC belt in a picture because he's launching a new boxing league of himself and he's going to destroy conventional wisdom. Then the next breath, he'll turn around and say, no, I'm not going to do that. There's room and space for everybody. They will want to own what they will want to own. And if the WBC and the WBA and the IBF fall by the wayside because all the best fighters are currently fighting in the framework of the ring framework that we're suggesting is going to be the case with the Saudis, that is what will happen.
That's maybe the long-term goal, but that won't happen overnight.
Wants to own the sport.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that won't happen overnight, Simon. These governing bodies are still going to play a big part.
He's already the number one
in the league.
He's already the number one, His Excellency, in the sport in terms of power and what he's done. Okay, so he brings Dana White in. What he said was he's given Dana White the flag, and they're gonna crush. Crush is a big, strong word. Then he comes out and says, "Yeah, the governing bodies we're still going to have that. We're still going to have everybody." My guess is that they do want to do that UFC type, the round thing. So there is one belt. The genius was to buy the Ring magazine because that's got the history.
That's the wrap.
So we have that in there. But this is, as Spencer says, going to take a long time to manifest. And in the meantime, we're still getting some of the best fighting the best.
So just out of curiosity, it took him 18 months, less than that, before everyone was proclaiming him as the face and vision of boxing, right? And now we're suggesting that it's going to take him a long time to dismantle the existing framework. The reasons why the Saudis have picked boxing and gone after it hell for leather is because they couldn't do it in golf because the structure was too resolute. They can't do it in football because the game is too structured and governed by the existing entities. But they can do it in boxing. And when I sat down 6 months ago with Eddie Hearn and called him a glorified agent, which of course was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the fact is, what do they need you for? And he told me that, oh, hang on, they'll need us for the infrastructure, for the ability to be able to put on events. And I said, well, geez, I'm sure they can work out to put a tent up in the long game and they'll find the intellectual capital. And here we are now. They have the greatest showman in town in terms of Dana White, who knows how to put an event on, knows what to do, knows how to monetize it, knows how to make sure that every aspect of all the demographics of who they want to contact, whether they're cross-pollinating between sports. I think if they want to, I think they can drive a coach and horses through the existence of the WBCs, the WBAs and the IBFs and make it a one game in town inside 2 years if they want to.
Inside 2 years? Maybe. Certainly not tomorrow, but it's going to be interesting to see how quickly they want to do that. And the governing bodies. And Frank Warren's,
I don't see it as inside
Frank
2
Warren's
years,
got a good point as well.
Much more than that.
Frank's got a good point. We do want one champion. That would be great. But Frank's got a good point. In opportunities for fighters, everyone wants to become a world champion. At the moment, you've got 4 chances. And
I agree with that too. Because the argument then becomes, if we've got this revolution, spirit of revolution in our heads about what this league might consist of and the best fight and the best, right? But fighters don't fight. The best fighters don't fight more than once or twice a year. So you're still going to have this dearth of challenges if you haven't got this plethora of opportunities for them to seemingly fight for meaningful straps.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's why I think the WBO, IBF, WBA, WBC, they still exist and there is still something there. The league could be something totally different and they've still got their eyes on things. The Ring magazine's a very important thing. Could that be what they're fighting for? The Ring magazine belt in the league? And it's just another opportunity for fighters to go there when they've got these world titles, etc. I think that, look, it's good for the sport.
I would like the WC getting a great big kick up the arse. I mean, I think they are. Piss poor organisation that have not made their mandatories happen, that have created ridiculous scenarios inside their structure that I think are poor. And I think that there is a great deal of benefit in discarding them.
It is and always has been a compelling Wild West. And if it can be put under one umbrella, fantastic. UFC was a phenomenal role model, a state of thing that everybody got into because it was storytelling, best fought the best, fantastic. But there's amateurs, there's grassroots, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure. I get that. We did start with one belt though, didn't we? WBC.
No, listen, and to build boxing from the ground up after, in the current state where boxing is now, it's always been historically.
Yes.
To build it from the ground up doesn't take 2 years. It takes a lot longer than that. The UFC model that Dana White took over at that time, it was already broken. It was a smaller model, and he built it to what it was.
The challenge to Dana as an excellency is Spencer says it's not going to take. You've got to do it within 2 years. Maybe they will. I'll tell you what, I'll go back to it again. The Ring Magazine acquisition is the genius stroke.
Absolutely.
Genius.
Absolutely. Interesting times.
Very.
So, following on from soothsayer Spence's forecasts about how the landscape is going to flow through, you're suggesting that Joseph Parker, as a result of the interim position that he occupies, will be given the scattered WBO belt when Usyk fights Daniel Dubois. And you're now suggesting that Anthony Joshua comes into that mix and will likely fight
Joseph Parker in the rematch.
In the rematch of
the WBO
of the 2018 Stinkfest of the Borden fight.
Well, listen, that's what I...
Sort of froze, didn't he, Parker, that night? Didn't
referee didn't help, did he?
It was a long time ago as well.
Referee didn't help.
Listen...
He's a different fighter now, though.
He's a totally different fighter. It was a long time ago, and it's a totally different fight now as well.
Mentally and physically as well, the weight he's put on.
Well, it's turned around, isn't it? Like, Parker's now going in as the champion, Joshua the challenger. They're both in different stages of their career, and it's a good fight, that one. Right. Would Joseph Parker start the favourite in many people's eyes? You know, that's where you're at with it.
Because of his rich vein of form right now.
Absolutely.
And Joshua being cleaned out by Daniel Dubois,
Absolutely.
You're going to suggest that.
But that's what I believe will happen.
Despite you being a Joshua lickspittle, does he merit the opportunity? Should he be getting this shot for the WBO? Shouldn't it be someone like Ajit Kabayel, whose recent run of form...
Kabayel's the interim WBC champion, so yeah, he deserves that shot, and he'll be looking at the bigger picture.
He's been given a world title shot for the WBO.
Simon, you know the commercial business and the commercial value of this game.
So this is a money fight.
Casual fans, commercial, AJ
everything.
Parker makes much more sense. Kabayel, of course he deserves a shot. Martin Bakole, we've waited around, deserves a shot. But what makes commercial business sense, AJ Parker does, if Usyk fights Dubois.
Bakole... protected his position, didn't he, as a result of taking the fight against Joe Parker, getting the multiple millions of dollars that he got on the caveat that he was protected in the Ajagba fight, wasn't he, and made second. So we know what his particular route map is.
Yeah.
Do you think Anthony Joshua is credible now as a challenger for a world title again?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Why not?
Why?
Why not?
He's reigned as a champion. He's a two-time heavyweight champion of the world who's been a poster boy for boxing for many, many years. And he's had a loss to Daniel Dubois, having found a bit of form again. Dubois, brilliant. Let's think about how Dubois took over Wembley that night rather than AJ's defeat. AJ's still a massive name in boxing and definitely deserves
but as
a
a
chance.
force, I'm not talking about his name. I'm not talking about the marketability of it. I was the only person in the room that potentially suggests that I wasn't buying into the bullshit of he was fully rehabilitated because of the Jermaine Franklin fight, because of the Robert Helenius fight, because of the Otto Walling fight, and because of the Ngannou fight. I've constantly said the first time he gets hit on the chin by a live one, I think he's going to have a problem.
Right,
and so with that in mind, that's the reasons why I say about the credibility of Anthony Joshua fighting for a world title again. Not because of his marketing name. We all accept he's a poster boy.
I'll flip it to you. Who do you think starts favourite of Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker, if that fight's made?
In current form, because he's not recovering from a crisis of probably the worst defeat in his career, Joseph Parker.
But what I'm saying is,
coming from being blasted around a ring.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So you had to think about that one. So Joseph Parker's a WBO champion. What I'm saying is, so why doesn't he warrant or credit being the challenger for that title against Joseph Parker?
Say that again?
We're saying that you're saying, does he deserve that shot? Why doesn't Anthony Joshua deserve that shot? Like Joseph Parker will be elevated to WBO champion. He deserves that shot. He still has that marketability. He still has that credibility. And he starts favourite for me against Parker.
From a marketing point of view, absolutely. And the reasons why I test it is because I think Joseph Parker has beaten credible opponents in recent times, and I don't think Anthony Joshua has.
But he's at that place where he would.
Hence the reason why Otto Wallen got beat up by Derek Chisora.
Yeah, but listen, Anthony Joshua still very much deserves that place to box for a world title.
Joshua boxed well against Otto Wallen, and he cleaned out Ngannou, and under Ben Davies, he was looking fine, and he came into that fight against Daniel Dubois as the favourite. He got beaten up, he got taken out, and it was a brilliant win for Daniel Dubois. Can Joshua recover from that? He did against Andy Ruiz.
But he don't want the rematch, does he?
I think if you'd had the rematch straight away, I think that, and Dubois had won again, that could have been the end of AJ. So I think that's the right decision to wait. I think the Fury fight is the big fight for Joshua. We now know Tyson is in soccer aid, so he's out of the picture for a bit. but I still think that is the fight that has to happen. So I worry about Joshua against other opponents before that, because you still want to see Fury-Joshua. That's the big fight for the casuals. But does AJ deserve a chance to fight for a world title again? 100%.
And I think that was the fight that Joshua was originally waiting for, that Tyson Fury fight. But with Fury being tied up with other obligations,
clear.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that's why Joshua now, that the roadmap back for him is to fight Parker, because he can't sit around waiting for Fury when we don't know if Fury's even going to ever box again. But if he wins that fight against Parker and he's got that WBO strap again, that makes him and Fury an even bigger fight.
So if he loses against Parker, would you then be in the camp of still advocating for the Fury fight?
Well, I think if he loses against Parker, then he will have to seriously consider where he's at and what he's going to do next, because that surely loses commercial value. Him versus, if he loses against Parker, him Fury down the road with Fury coming back off a long layoff. It's not the fight.
I think it's an interesting fight as well, Joshua Parker, because, as you said, it wasn't a good one in Wales all those years ago.
It wasn't.
It wasn't a
But
good
the
fight
referee
at all.
didn't help.
It wasn't good, but it was a unification, and Joe came in as a world champion, and it was a decent performance from Joshua, nothing more really. But it's a much more fascinating rematch now, all these years later, because Parker mentally is a different person. He's matured. Physically, he looked huge. He looked in such massive condition against Bakoli. And AJ's coming off a bad defeat. So I think it's a really...
there's a narrative there.
Real curiosity.
Absolutely. Look, one person that's got a big interest in the heavyweight divisions, of course, I would suggest the king of the heavyweight division, which is Frank Warren. Let's have a listen to what he's had to say.
On Thursday, you said by the evening you'd tell us who Moses Itauma was going to fight. Can you tell us now?
He will be on the card.
And which card?
On the Manchester card.
On April the 5th. Okay, that's good to know. And what's happening with Fabio Wardley? I think I know.
You know more than I do. We'll be announcing that next week. He's got a very, very big fight coming up.
Could it be in a football ground?
I hope so. I'd love to do that for him. I'd love to deliver that for him.
Could it be an American?
It could be an American. One thing for sure, it'll be somebody from this planet.
Right, riddle me this, riddle me that. Who is Frank speaking of? I thought we had established, or maybe we just established it amongst ourselves, that Fabio was fighting Kubrat Pulev.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at.
Where's this one going then?
Fabio's WBA #1. Pulev is the regular champion, and that is the natural choice and progression, I think, for Fabio Wardley, is to box Pulev. I mean, you're talking about, like when Gareth there talking about big American names, you go, well, is it a Deontay Wilder or someone like that, or an Andy Ruiz? No, I think that Pulev is the obvious choice. That is the one that you would want to take in Ipswich at the ground.
Why?
That's the obvious fight.
Why?
Because he's the WBA regular champion, and for him, it puts him up in the mix now, looking at getting the other big fights. I mean, from the business point of view, for him to win the regular, instead of going somewhere else, that's the obvious progression.
It's a good fight for Fabio Wardley. I've heard that Ipswich was being touted for a while. I think the summer at Portman Road is a great opportunity. However, it's an interesting situation, because I was with Moses Itauma the other day. Moses wasn't quite sure sort of who he's fighting. There's still that Mike Tyson record dangling around if Moses can become a world champion by the end of May. So I was thinking, does Moses then fight Kubrat Pulev? But I think Frank wants to take his time with Moses Itauma, match him properly. I'm hearing maybe someone like Nelson Heiser, the undefeated Albanian, would be next for Moses. But I think that's a good fight with Pulev and Wardley for the summer. If it is an American name, you can look at Deontay Wilder's a massive name, obviously, still. You could look at maybe Baby Miller. And you could look at the one I thought over the weekend when I was coming home. I thought maybe Andy Ruiz, because he's known, obviously, to British fight fans. But if Fabio Wardley and Kubrat Pulev
What about
is
Jared
made,
Anderson, the one that Martin Bakoli flattened?
That's another one. Another one. He's in there. There's so many heavyweights, Simon, that could be fighting in these fights. As you say, you mentioned Lawrence Okoli the other day. We haven't really talked about Ajit Kabayel. There's so many. Zhilei Zhang, I know he got beaten, but still a big draw in China. There's so many fighters out there. And Dillian White. Derek Chisora, that should happen.
Dillian White, Derek Chisora, 3 will be the next fight for both of those guys. I think that's the natural one as well.
So what is, I mean, you touched upon Moses Itauma, and we've debated how good this kid is on previous shows. We don't need to rehearse that speech. But if you were giving advice to people around Itauma, what would you be suggesting for him, Adam? What would you think? I mean, obviously he's knocking out people. Marius Wacky whacked him out, for excuse the expression. So Dempsey McKean, obviously a lot was made of the fact that he took Filip Hrgovic deep into the fight and to get rid of him, and obviously Moses got rid of him pretty quickly. So everyone's getting very excited about this kid, and rightly so. But the building blocks, I don't think he's going to... This idea that he should be chasing Mike Tyson's record, you should fight when you're ready to fight at the levels that you're ready to fight at and not be dictated to by other people's agendas and history. How would you guide his career? What would you think that Frank should be doing? And Frank's a master at this. And we know that anyway, so we're not dispensing advice that Frank probably doesn't already know. But for people listening to the show, what do you think that we should be doing with Atoma?
Frank's the best. I mean,
I agree.
the way he got Ricky at matchmaking and guiding fighters to a certain point. I think you see back at Ricky Hatton, Nassim Hamid, Joe Calzaghe, proven. Frank getting it right most of the time. Didn't with Hamza Shiraz the other day, by the way, but most of the time gets it right. I think with Moses, I spoke to Marius Vac out in Spain when he was in the Usyk camp.
Did you pick? By the way, before I let you get away with that one, did you pick Shiraz to win that fight, or did you pick Adames?
I thought Shiraz would have enough about him, and I thought he underperformed, and I was disappointed in him.
Right. So then it doesn't make Frank necessarily wrong, then, does it?
No, I think Frank got it. I thought he got it right. Maybe Hamza got it wrong on the night, but Frank normally gets it right. You know what I mean? And Frank was in the corner, sort of screaming for Hamza, as well as His Excellency.
Absolutely.
However, we digress. Marius Vac told me that Moses Atama was the best he's faced. He said his angles were unbelievable. I thought the way he dealt with Dempsey McKean was terrific. Yep. Moses is itching for it. He wants to break Tyson's record. He wants to fight Usyk next, but he also wants to go into Usyk's camp to learn because he's smart, Moses. So what I would do is I would do that. I would get him a chance and maybe spend a bit of time with Usyk. He's had time with Fury. He's had time with most of them. Get some time, take a little bit more. I think someone like Nelson Heiser, undefeated, that's a good name, Justice Hooney, someone like that. Then maybe by the end of the year, early next year, we can be looking at a possible world title tilt, but not quite yet for Moses. Take your time. He's so young. He's 20. He's got so much about him. He's a smart fighter. He's a very committed fighter. He's a southpaw. He hits hard. He's got great movement. He's the future.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Frank. That's Frank's plan anyway. Like he recognises that. Having a conversation with him, look, if I put him in with Anthony Joshua now, he could beat Anthony Joshua now. That's where they feel that he's sat right now. He could beat half of the top 5 or 6. But it's all about once you beat them, you're there, and it's about the timing and the longevity of it. And I think that's what he's looking at with Moses.
There is a vast difference, though, isn't there? I mean, I take you, because I'm always going to bow to your knowledge, but there's one thing looking at what he's doing to opponents that are at a certain level. It's another thing sticking him in with very experienced, world-level operators that all of a sudden show you up the things that we haven't seen him yet make mistakes in.
Yeah.
So surely the argument that he could stick him in and beat this person, he could beat that person, that's a little bit...
I totally
debatable
agree.
because these guys are experienced operators.
Totally agree with you because, like you say, like if you want to look at it and you're talking about boxing at that sort of level and putting them in with them sort of fighters, then you go like, I tell you what, go in with an Andy Ruiz Jr., a guy that's tough.
That's what happened to Dubois in his third phase. Lost to Joyce, lost again to Usyk, but then coming back, he had to get through Miller, he had to get through Hrgović before Joshua.
Absolutely.
It's about building.
You mentioned Joe Joyce, and you bring me to that subject matter because obviously the fight with Dillian White's dropped out. Filip Hrgović replaces him. Hrgović at one time was considered to be, well, he wasn't considered to be, he was the mandatory challenger for the IBF.
Yeah.
Daniel Dubois took some heavy licks off him, came through and dealt with him. This is a very difficult fight for someone whose star has been massively eclipsed, Joe Joyce, ever since Zhang, ever since the foolish decision to take the immediate rematch with Zhang. And of course now the result against Derek Chisora, all of them have brought Joe Joyce to this crossroads now where this is it now.
But
bust for him. If he loses this fight, he's done, but it's a difficult fight to take, isn't it?
This is the obvious choice, though, where he's at and his age, taking his age into consideration, the opportunities that he's had, and losing to Zhang a couple of times, you have to take this fight against Hrgović, who is coming off the defeat as well. It's the natural progression.
Is it a more difficult fight than the Dillian White fight?
Yes.
I think it is, and I think Heavy Impact had to be Heavy Impact. Queensbury moving to DAZN, wanted a big first show. We've already lost to Cody and Riakporhe from it, so I think that's a great replacement. A better, maybe, replacement. I think Hrgović and Joyce is a fabulous fight. I think it will really blend.
Who wins?
I think you've got to say that Hrgović would probably start the favourite.
Yes, I think Hrgović starts favourite, but Joyce will give it absolutely everything. I think it's going to be a really, really entertaining fight.
Good fight, I agree. So, Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn were guests on my old mate Piers Morgan's show. Let's have a little listen to something they said, or some of the things they said.
Your dad intervened with the egg throwing and put his arm, I think, on your throat. And at the second press conference, you basically threatened Nigel Benn. Said if he did that again, you deal with him. And
it wasn't a threat, it was a promise.
Oh, it's not a promise, is it?
You can't touch scumbag. You can't.
What we did. So you can throw an egg in his face and his father can't.
No, me and him are fighting.
You're just upset.
Me and you are fighting.
Your dad can't stand you. My dad has my back. You are. That's all that
I'm not upset. My dad put me and you are fighting. Whatever happens between us,
my dad would put his arms around you. What are you going to do about it?
No one else.
What are you going to do about it? Tell me.
No one else can touch me.
Tell me.
If they do, there'll be consequences.
Consequences to what?
If anyone else
slap you right now,
if anyone else touches me,
what if I was to slap you right now? What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, go on, go ahead.
Yeah, talk about my dad.
I'm not talking about your dad.
No.
But I told him.
But
I told him.
Get off me, please.
My old man would never touch you, so your old man's never going to touch me.
I'll never slap you.
You would never slap me.
Yeah, no, I won't slap you.
You put your hands on me twice since my last fight.
When?
You pushed me.
Push, a little push.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You put your hands on me.
Little push and stuff. Stop
moaning
about it.
You put your hands on me.
Stop moaning about it. A little push and shove. Stop moaning about it. Talk about my dad.
You put your hands on me, I put my hands on you.
I'll never disrespect your dad.
Yes, you would. You disrespected him before.
What, the fact that he don't like you? It's a matter of fact.
Okay, well,
it's
disrespect.
It's a matter of fact. How's that disrespect?
You can't give it and not take it.
You up by talking about my dad. You done up talking about my dad.
By taking this fight.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm assuming you guys watched this as and when it was. I mean, I thought it was pure old nonsense, but what did you guys
I like
take
the pause at the end there. That was quite interesting, wasn't it? I loved it. I love this. I know you don't like it. I love this fight. And I love this fight because it is getting into the heart of the casual. I'm loving it. And I cannot wait for fight week.
I think Eubank is actually genius at the moment, the way that he's handling this, you know, and I think that they're Conor getting the ump and saying, you know, about gravity, you know, threatening my dad and rare, you know, just because he gave him a slap. Well, he sort of deserved that slap, didn't he?
But by the way,
he deserved that slap, though.
Well, by the way, I also think Chris's point is right. This is a fight between me and you. Whatever I do to you is between me and you. It has nothing to do with your dad.
I totally agree with that.
It's nothing to do with my dad. And I think he's absolutely right. But there's a lot more. There's also a lot more riding on this now, isn't there? Hasn't Eubank Jr. picked up the bait that Eddie Hearn tried to throw at Ben Shalom and put a £1 million bet?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so he's obviously said he put it on Ben Shalom, didn't he? Knowing that Ben would sort of like brick himself and not take the bet at that time. Eubank's picked up on that. Go onto his Instagram, have a look at what he's done there, and he said, "Listen, I want the bet. So let's see where your balls are now. I'll take the bet." Chris is a gambler.
We need to campaign on this because Tyson Fury got out of paying his £1 million bet to Piers Morgan. Let's make sure that Mr. Hearn, doesn't get away with not placing his bet.
Let's see where this goes. Yeah, well, he called him a few more things than a rodent, but...
During the interview, Piers Morgan pushed Eubank Jr. on Conor Benn's failed drugs tests. Let's have a listen.
You need to accept, do you not, due process was conducted, and at the end of it, they made conclusions. You may not like the conclusions, you may not accept the conclusions, but they are conclusions which have allowed this fight to happen. Without them concluding that he hadn't done this deliberately, you wouldn't be getting in the ring with him.
Again, fighters can fail drugs tests and appear back in the ring. It's happened 1 million times before, and it will happen 1 million times again. This is what's happened with Conor. Whether he is innocent of not knowing that how the drugs got in his system, you're still guilty.
Do you accept that can happen?
Because
do you accept that can
as a fighter, it is your job to know everything you are eating, drinking, putting into your system. If you don't monitor it, and somebody slips something in somewhere, which I do not believe, but if that's what he's trying to say happened, it's still your fault, you're still guilty, you're still a drugs cheat, and we still have to make an example of it.
Conor, you've said to me before, it's been your position, I think, that you believe it may have come from contaminated eggs. Is that still your position about it? Is that what you think is the...
The case is done. I'm not here to talk about the case at all. It's, you know...
I'm only asking because he hit you with an egg, obviously.
He can do what he wants. He's an idiot. And he's an idiot that's going to get chinned come April 26. Period.
All of the points that Chris makes are, in essence, right. But if you're so offended, the simple thing is, don't fight what you consider to be a drug cheat. And if you want to fight him, and you are going to fight him, why don't you pack up the ball about the drugs cheat because you've chosen to fight him now? So isn't it all a bit irrelevant?
No, I'll tell you why he's doing it. It's obviously because this is the mind games. This is where it begins, and he's trying to rattle Conor.
I know why he's doing it.
Yeah, he knows he's an emotional kid, and he's playing the mind games. He's rightly so. You know, we've got to remember...
Premeditated mind games.
Yeah, Conor Benn has been cleared to box. They still haven't proved why it was in the system. It was still there, but he's been cleared to box. That's where they're at with it now. Chris Eubank is picking up on that. That's why he's calling him a drug cheat. That's why he's saying you've never proved that it's not in your system.
But it's a transparent agenda, isn't it? But I'm digging perhaps a little bit more behind it because I'm looking at it more literally and laterally, which is if I'm Conor Benn on the side of this, I know what he's going to do. I'm going to, and my argument would be, surely, if I were to push back on it, if you think this is so offensive to you,
why are you fighting me?
Why are you fighting me then?
Yeah.
The reason why you're fighting me is because you need some money, Chris, or whatever the tactic is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, I mean, the big argument rages about the cleared and exonerated point of view, which I don't accept that he's been cleared or exonerated. I accept that he's been cleared to have this fight.
Yes, of course.
And the argument then raises about what actually transpired, and the debate is that Conor can actually release the findings of the NADP if he chooses to, and the confidentiality is at his bequest. So if he's so cleared, why doesn't he let everybody know what actually transpired? And my argument would be because he doesn't want to, because perhaps the outcomes don't clear him in the way that people suggest he's being cleared, right?
And that we're not quite sure.
Well, not quite sure, but my understanding of it is reasonably understood that the confidentiality order is something that Conor can waive if he wants to.
And that would
I'm
stop
assuming,
all these conversations
correct.
and all these...
I'm assuming...
Dead in their track.
Absolutely.
But I'm assuming he doesn't want to release that confidentiality for one of two reasons. One, he doesn't like what it's going to say, or two, there's a compensation situation manifesting itself and maybe it compromises that. But when you listen to these exchanges and the debate going on between Chris, who's trying to land the point about what you are and what you're not, even though it's a hypocritical thing to do because you've chosen to fight him, even though Chris was prepared to fight him on Kalle Sauerland's advice on the basis of it was a drug that shouldn't concern him. So it's all hypocrisy. But does Conor come out of these exchanges looking more likely to have been the recipient of a bad set of circumstances or more guilty as a result of these exchanges?
I mean,
I know where I'm sat on it.
The casuals might be listening to Eubank and thinking he's guilty. Us in boxing, we know that the situation is very complex, complicated, difficult. Ultimately, something seems to be found in his system originally. Did he put his hands up and say, look, it was in my system, I don't know how it got there?
Adam, the situation is this. It was in his system at the time when he got the ban, or when he got his licence revoked. It was in his system.
The fight didn't happen.
It still has not been clear to anybody that it wasn't in his system, but he's been cleared to box. That's what we got to remember.
He's been cleared to box.
That's all it is. But it was still in the system, right? And that is it. And that's never been cleared up. He's never proved that. And whether he says he can prove his innocence, we'll prove it then, and it stops this debate. But it was in his system. And that's it.
Right. And
Twice.
And that's the point we always argue
by the
about.
way.
And the unfortunate thing for the poor and Conor Benn situation is he never made a claim about eggs. He wasn't him.
Yeah, it was WBC.
He never made any defence about eggs. In fact, he refuted and disputed the idea of eggs. So he's actually being castigated for things that he never said.
But what was his defence, by the way? Then what did he say? How he got there?
I think there was an element of contamination, was the argument, and that was pushed back by the WBC because they can't have their clean boxing programme or their fights being able to, they can't have their apparatus dismantled. So I think there's a variety of arguments that no one can be 100% across. But look, during most of these exchanges, I think we kind of universally agree that Chris is running riot, whether it's with Eddie Hearn or it's at someone else's expense.
But it's about Conor's emotions as well. I mean, he is being riled, and Nigel never beat Chris, so he had the draw and he had the loss, so the Benns want.
But there's a point why I'm saying that, because in this next piece of VT, I think Conor lands a few metaphoric blows on Chris Eubank Jr.
We are where we are, whether we like it or not, because of our dads.
That's true.
They laid the foundations. Yeah, we have to work hard. Yeah, we have to go through adversity. Yeah, we have to go through Nepo kids. But ultimately, this is the blessings of our dads. They laid the foundation for us. So it's sad to see that the relationship ain't working on their end, genuinely, and I mean that. It's sad to see. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that being funny, because the relationship I have with my dad, it would be great to see you and your dad in your corner. I mean that. No sarcasm, not being a...
It's hard to believe.
No, I'm being... Well...
I've got to be careful. I don't want you drawing me into something.
No, listen, I'm just saying.
I think he's being sincere.
Because you haven't heard the things he said leading up to this interview.
About you. Yeah, about you, of course. I think you're an idiot.
About our relationship, my father's relationship.
Your dad don't like you. Yes, I agree. Your dad don't like you. It's a matter of... That's a fact.
Him talking about him,
it's a fact.
I take everything he's saying with a grain of salt. I can't help it.
Okay, well, it's a matter of fact your dad don't like you. Why is he be here? it's not really, it's not me just saying that or speculating that. It's the truth. But
you don't know what the truth is.
Okay.
You think
well,
you know,
you don't know what the truth is. You think you know. It's all right back at you. But what I'm trying to say to you is it would be nice to see your dad there in your corner.
Like Chris is pulling at a thread with the drug cheat allegation. He's pulling at a thread with about his relationship with his father.
Yeah.
You know, about whether he likes him or he doesn't like him. I don't think, alongside whether his father does or doesn't like what his son's doing, he certainly doesn't like this fight.
No, he doesn't.
I think that's at the centre of it. And I remember Chris Senior telling me, in no uncertain terms, it was a bit witchy-poo, it didn't make a lot of sense, but he was suggesting that he was in fact the reasons why the first fight had been stopped, and it was his, you know,
He hated it before, didn't he?
Well,
Yeah,
well,
he hated it first time.
I think he hated it before because of the weight that it was made at,
Yeah,
and Chris
yeah.
Senior, who had injured a boxer in the ring as well, understands, you know, the dangers,
And he was
the
accusing people
consequences.
of potentially
And
committing murder, wasn't
yeah,
he?
Yeah, he was against that.
Yeah.
And the reason why, from my understanding with Chris Eubank Jr., while he's not going to be involved in this one right now, is because relationships are broken down with the loss of the brother with Sebastian, Chris having those mental health issues, which we all saw, and everything else, but also the fact that he's not in control of this whole thing,
But
Simon.
I think I have always felt, and I said it to Chris Senior, that it is this young man's gift to be his own man and ultimately to travel in his own direction and to come out from underneath your shadow. And all I heard from Chris Senior in either the upfront interview I did with him or live on talkSPORT with Jim White was I, me, I, and I felt sorry for Junior because he is a 34-year-old man at the time. He wants his own thing. His father is always going to be the centre of attention.
Yeah.
I think he's right to make his own decisions.
Simon, I see exactly what you're saying because Nigel has stood back from
Yeah, he
Conor's
has.
career and Chris Senior was right in the front at the beginning. And I think it's great that Junior is walking his own path.
So do I.
However, they have had horrendous tragedy in
I know
their
they have.
family.
I know they
with
have.
the loss of their wonderful
Sebastian.
brother Sebastian,
I know.
lovely guy. And also, you know, Chris has had his difficulties senior and that relationship, you all want to see your father and son. And I think actually what Conor said there, I think he hates Junior, Conor Benn, but I think what he was saying there is it would be good to have your dad there, not just for the fight and just for the promotion, which obviously it would be, but actually it'd be really good because my dad's here and it'd be good to have your dad there as well to complete the story.
Well, Simon was right, though, that it was all because Chris wanted to control this whole situation with Junior, wanted to be the guy, wanted to be the centre. Well, actually, it's about Junior. And I think when Junior took those reins back,
didn't like it.
Chris didn't like it.
Could
That is a
Senior
fact.
come back in and just be a bit part player in the last week?
Well,
I think we
the
could
big
see him there.
expression he felt was that the advice that was being given, the things that Chris Eubank Jr. was being exposed to were fundamentally wrong. And he said, if you don't listen, you're going to feel. That was his big message because he felt that Eubank Jr. was being given the wrong guidance by the wrong people in the wrong place, was put in jeopardy. And of course, he felt that was the wrong thing for his son to experience. I think it's a combination of two. I think there's an element of that, and I think there's an element of jurisdiction that he thinks he's entitled to over his son. Do you expect him? Because I do. I think this circus doesn't have its full roster of entertainers if you haven't got the two fathers in the mix.
I think
we need Senior there. We need him there, and we need him, to complete the story, the legacy, the years, and everything else. But most importantly, for me, we need him there because it's his son in a massive fight.
I think that we do see him there, if I'm
So do I.
totally honest. Could you imagine seeing him there on the Harley, coming in on the Harley? So the first time we actually see him, reliving that time, you know, that would be insane.
Junior sort of...
Practicing his 2 new words of the week.
Absolutely.
He's acquired.
Absolutely.
Junior welcoming him in.
On the Harley.
It's going to happen.
Fantastic.
Come on.
Fantastic. Well, now, for you guys out there, don't forget you can see Piers Morgan's interview with Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn in full on the Piers Morgan Uncensored YouTube channel now. Over the weekend, we saw the pocket rocket, the wrecking ball, Nick Ball, defend his WBA title.
Yeah.
You were both on site. What did you make of that fight?
Loved it. Liverpool, big time boxing back in Liverpool. Massive boxing fans there, and it was a great few days up there actually. And I think Nick Ball, you know, he had to come through, which we expected. That TJ Donaghy was one of those guys, former world champion, that was always going to be tough, tricky, very heavy-handed, and Ball had to figure that out. But he showed he had that adaptability, and he come good in the end. I thought it was a good contest actually.
Electric atmosphere. Jack Turner, remember his name? He shone on the card.
Saw it.
Nick Ball, had a few problems early, didn't he, with TJ Donaghy, who I thought was a really, really brave, tough, difficult, awkward southpaw to work out. Nick worked it out, adaptable, and gets another win. Second defence done.
Sure.
But
where are you now with
the
Nick Ball?
Inoue thing?
Because I was prepared not that it's my gift, but the Ronnie Rios fight, I go, you know what? You've had 2 hard fights against Vargas and Ford. You get your homecoming. You get it in a manner which is an opponent which gives you makes you look good. I know he was a former world champion, but he was on the other side of the best version of himself. I'd like to see Nick Ball in with Fulton or Espinoza or Leo, rather than a couple of these, what I consider to be, with all due respect, a little bit of gimme fights.
Totally agree. Want him in unifications next. I think Fulton's the one that they should go for. I mean, his dream's to fight in Anfield, and his dream is also to fight Inoue. But I spoke to Paul Stevenson afterwards, and he said, look, if we're given the Inoue fight next, we've got to think about it, because if it's huge money and it's an opportunity, that has to be taken into account. Do I think it's the right fight for him next? No. I think Nick needs another couple at featherweight. Let's see where Inoue's got his year planned as well. Maybe the end of the year, early next year for that one. But I'd like to see unifications for Nick Ball next.
I'm talking about that fight. I mean, obviously, we've seen Nick Ball explode onto our scenes for people in the last 12 months with the unjust result against Ray Vargas, which he won that fight. And then the brilliant performance against Ray Ford, which he also won. So he should be a 2-belt holder anyway. When we look at the reality of what we've seen from him, and we know what we know of Inoue, do we think that he's got the toolkit, predominantly the power, to deal with the challenge that Inoue presents?
I think that it's all about timing, and I think that with Nick Ball, he's still developing into that champion, and I think that he's got to go after the other champions for the unification, and that will develop him. That will be his apprenticeship to go and then fight Inoue. Right now, it would be too soon. Inoue would start a huge favourite because his season's at that level. But
pound for pound,
the potential is there.
He's gone through the weights, and he's a seasoned world operator as well. Nick isn't. He's just had a very good year, 2024. He needs more world ring education, unifications and beyond. And then, wow, go for Inoue. See Inoue come up, and let's see what happens.
I'll tell you what he did show there when you're looking at Nick, though, there with Doheny, that it was a tough fight. He had to work it out. The first couple of rounds didn't go his way. He's heavy-handed as well, Doheny, and he took it up, he soaked it up, he showed that he's got incredible character, but he can adapt and adjust and turn things around. And that's a good quality for a champion.
It is.
Can I ask you a controversial question? Not particularly controversial, but in terms of suggesting that there might have been a worse outcome. Should he have been kicked out of the fight for kicking?
No, because he was put into a headlock. He was put into, Doheny was doing the right thing. He's playing mind games, 38-year-old who knew the game. He put him in a headlock and he held him there, and frustrations kicked in. He let his foot go. He should have had a public warning for it.
Or a point taken off.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, a public warning.
Not disqualified. He was in a headlock, and then he kicked out, which was wrong, absolutely wrong. And there was a couple of throws as well. He got a point taken off. Maybe he should have had 2 points taken off in the fight. Disqualification, no. He's a world champion.
Yeah, exactly. Could you imagine if I put you in a headlock, what you would have done?
What would you have step there to get there in the first place? How good is Nick Ball?
He's very good.
There you go.
He's very good, but is he as good as Inoue? He's not proven yet. Inoue is a pound.
But he's not at that level of his show.
No, he's the monster. He's one of the greatest fighters of our generation. Nick Ball is a very good world champion who needs to develop. Will Inoue be too much for him? Maybe. But I tell you what, he'll give it an absolute go. And I'd like to see it at the right time. Now is not the right time.
That's it for episode 112 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan, Spencer Oliver and Adam Smith. And we'll see you guys next time we're out.